GameStop is going to be trialing some new store concepts. This is from John Wilds over at IGN. So it says it's no secret that GameStop has had a rough few years financially. They saw a third quarter loss of nearly $500 million last November, even after selling Sprint Mobile for a cool $700 million. Recently, it had to stop searching for a new buyer with its stocks plummeting by over 25%. Obviously, something needs to change, and today GameStop announced that its new business saving strategy is turning stores into, quote, unique experiences, end quote. The new direction is part of a partnership with colossal marketing company RGA and revolves around GameStop's long-held desire to, quote, reaffirm its place in video game culture, end quote. Together, GameStop and RGA are developing and piloting new and streamlined physical store concepts, introducing new ways for gamers to try new titles before they buy them, end quote. Read the announcement before going on to say that unique store concepts that offer things like, quote, competitive sessions and homegrown e-leagues to locations that sell strictly retro gaming software and hardware, end quote, are just some of the ideas that they're going to trial in new concept stores. So, full disclosure, I used to work at GameStop. I don't own any like stock in GameStop or anything like that. And I spoke freely about my experience at GameStop while I was working there, and I'll continue to speak freely about GameStop now that I'm not working there. I don't even put that I worked at GameStop on my resume because I'm like, this experience doesn't matter. But I spent, 9 months working there, so almost a year, worked my way up to an assistant manager position. And it was a poorly run company, right? And I don't think that comes as a shock to anybody. But it's clear that something has to change, right? Like even when I was there, they were hemorrhaging cash on big pre-orders. They were losing out behind the market on digital game sales. They weren't really adapting with how rapidly the gaming industry was changing, and it's taking an even further step in both the subscription-based model of game sales. Talking about Uplay Plus earlier in the show, and then you've got Xbox Game Pass, EA Access. All kinds of things where people can just pay a monthly fee, download their games, and never have to step foot in a physical store. Like they're going to have to figure out ways to generate foot traffic. And so when I was working there, the strategy was we need to increase our trade-ins, we need to increase our used game sales, we need to increase our pre-orders, and then we need to increase our collectible sales, our non gaming item sales. And so, GameStop owns ThinkGeek, and they converted a lot of their stores, including the one that I worked at, into a half and half store, which means half of the floor space is dedicated to gaming, half of the store space is dedicated to memorabilia. I would argue that it's probably more 70-30 memorabilia to games ratio, but they call it half and half, or 50-50 stores. And so that was their strategy, right? But it was short-sighted. If we get people to trade in games and then pre-order more games, yada, yada, yada. But the problem is that at a point when people stop buying physical games, there are going to be no games for people to trade in. So I worked there in 2016. So that was 3 years after the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One came out. I would still say probably 70% of our business was on PS3 and Xbox 360. And that was because I worked in a poor area. The town I'm from isn't necessarily rolling in the dough or anything like that. But I live in a poor neighborhood, and a large portion of the revenue that was being generated was off of game sales for the PS3 and Xbox 360. I would say the average amount for a trade-in when somebody brought in games was less than $10. And for a lot of these people, whatever they traded in, that was the money that they were going to spend in the store. They weren't going to spend a dime more. And so the model just never felt right in what I was aware of being a completely changing market, in that I, had been covering games and seeing that digital was starting to take hold and more people were going that way. Like what GameStop was doing was unsustainable. Even the new direction that they were trying to set was unsustainable. And for the most part, people didn't care about the collectible shit that was. I remember we had a Death Star waffle iron. We had $400 statues that we had in display cases and stuff like that. We had like a replica Captain America shield that was a few $100s. I'm like, guys, we are selling $3 pre-owned copies of Halo 3. You know? I have people who are buying NBA 2K12 still. Like, and look, it's no judgment about people. Like, play what you can afford to play and enjoy what it is that you're playing. But the fact of the matter is like, if you looked at the average sales we were making, it made no sense to convert our store to say like, oh man, well, here's a $25 PlayStation desk light. It's like, people aren't going to spend their money on this shit. If they have $25 to spend in this store, they are going to spend it on video games or possibly pop figures, but they're not going to buy this knickknack shit. And so it made no sense to me, right? At the time I was working there, it was when they started doing retro game trade-ins too. They had started it just as like a test among a couple stores, but then they started allowing more and more stores to do it. But we weren't allowed to turn around and sell games that were traded. We had to send them back to the Rock. They had to get tested, and then they would get distributed to other stores that actually sold the used games, or you could order them online for your customers. But I was like, look, there are people around here who would love to be able to buy N64 games or Game Boy Advance games or PlayStation 1 games. Like, now, all that being said, I like this direction that they're, because they understand like, hey, the center of our model cannot be new game releases anymore. There's a higher and higher percentage of people who are buying these games digitally for a multitude of reasons, right? It's the same price and it's way more convenient. You know, they may like the fact that they can preload it before launch and just play it as soon as midnight hits, and they don't have to go and stand in line, which we tried to combat somewhat. You know, we had a lot of midnight releases that got converted to 9 p.m. releases so that people could come pick it up early and then play right when the game unlocks. But you know, for whatever reason, more and more people are going to digital, myself included. And so centering your business model around the sale of physical games just isn't going to work. And continuing to double down on the used game market is only going to continue to alienate the hardware makers who rely on your brick and mortar stores to push these consoles, but have more and more options on where to sell these things that don't require them to keep an inventory in your stock room. They can sell them on Amazon. They can sell them on any other digital retailer. They can sell them at Walmart. And these are people who don't try to stamp on other parts of their monetization models, right? So they can't double down on new game sales. They can't double down on used game sales. What are the emerging markets that we can enter into? And that's what GameStop is asking themselves, right? And then two things show their head. Number one is this boutique experience, which I've been saying for years is what GameStop needs to go for. If they could strike a partnership up with like limited run games and say, hey, we would love to sell limited run games in our stores exclusively, and say like each store gets X amount of copies of this game, and or these stores around around the country are going to get them, and like make it an event when these cool, maybe only digital or these cool like cult hits or whatever get a physical release. Like, make it an event. Make your store these boutique stores. Sell retro games and things like that. Like, make your store spaces for people to hang out. I walk into a GameStop now, and I'm not joking. Like, I get anxiety as soon as I walk in just because it's wall-to-wall shit. Just packed up. Like, I've been looking for a pop. I've been looking for some pops, right? Like, and I like going and looking for them because it's part of the fun, but like, they're on shelves where you can't even like move stuff around to see what's behind it. And some of these stores have their pops like 4 pops deep on the shelf. It's just impossible to look for anything. And then there's absolutely no way to go in there with any intention of buying a collectible item, hoping that they have it. You just really have to go in and browse and hope that that you find what you're looking for, or hope that you stumble across something that you want. But part of the reason I loved working at GameStop was the number of customers who I had come in, who I knew on a first name basis, who talked about video games with me. And the fact that it was a space. And even before I worked at GameStop, some of the things that I loved were like the Madden tournament that was hosted each year at the midnight release, making it event based. Gaming has become more and more community driven around games, around personalities, around hobbies within gaming, around genres. And if you can grow your market in the like e-leagues, right? Create some amateur e-leagues in your area. Like, hey, here, we have an adult Overwatch league. You can sign up to be a part of the team. Maybe you pay an entry fee to get on it. Each person who competes gets this cool thing. We play every weekend, one weekend a month, something like that, with a big tournament to end it. Maybe there's a cash prize, something like that. Like something to generate foot traffic to your store that when people are there, they're like, oh yeah, maybe I'll pick this up. Maybe I'll buy some currency or buy this game, or pick up this retro console or something like. So I don't know. I like this. I also think GameStop has a unique opportunity to make, and there was some news about this a couple months ago about how they wanted to make inroads in the like amateur kids esports gaming, where they're like, oh, we're the little league of Rocket League. Kids can come, they can play in an organized Rocket League tournament with other people, in much the same way that they can go play Little League or Parks and Rec soccer or whatever. I think that GameStop has some unique opportunities to take advantage of these spaces and to create fans of their brands who may not have been fans before, in the boutique space and in the esports space. Two emerging markets where people are looking for places to go hang out. Make it community centric. Don't make it so transactional. Oh man, another thing I hate about walking into a GameStop is the barrage of questions. Also, when's the last time any of you guys have been in a GameStop? Let me know in the chat if you're hanging out, or on YouTube in the comments if you're watching. Like, honestly, when's the last time you've been? I go in a couple times a month. We're a small town. We like to go in and browse. My wife and I do, but I probably buy something once every 2 months when I'm in. When I was a kid, man, anytime I had a spare coin, I would go. Madbrock says had to go last week and get a new controller. How would you describe your experience when you walked in? How would you describe the customer service experience when you were there? I'm really curious, because I've got words in mind about how I would describe the customer service experience at GameStop. None. One guy working. Fascinating. What time of day was it? Not to grill you about your GameStop experience, but I'm just curious. Because here's my experience every time I walk into a GameStop. Walk in, beep, 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 the little door chime goes off. It's about 3:30. We normally go around 6:30. Walk in, open up the door. Somebody immediately walks up to me. Hey man, welcome to GameStop. How's it going? You in here for anything in particular? Oh no, I'm just browsing. Well, just to let you know, such and such game is coming out next week. You can pre-order it. We're also actually just now taking pre-orders on Final Fantasy VII. Comes out, at the beginning of 2020. Let me hand you the ad, and then you go up, you do your shopping, and they're always hovering, right? I went in there to buy this headset. I was like, hey, I know what I'm looking for. I know like the general thing of what I'm looking for. I would just like to browse, read the boxes, figure out what it is I'm actually after. And so I'm looking at the wall, and this guy's like, well, are you looking for something that's wireless for this and that? And I'm like, yeah, I'm looking for something that's wireless that can connect to at least my PC and Xbox. If it can't connect wirelessly to the PS4, that's fine. And he's like, oh man, well, if wireless isn't that important to you, here's a great wired one for $30. And I'm like, look, man, I'm looking to spend a substantial amount of money to buy something that is wireless. I have the wire hooked up now because if there's not audio playing through this at all times, it'll shut off after. But I was like, wireless is very important to me. And he's like, all right, well, let me go show you this one. It's wired too, but it's a great headset. Partner says, I tell them to go fuck themselves in a very polite manner, of course. I don't want to come off rude. I try to be that way, man. Like, I try to say, look, I'm just browsing. I'll let you know if I have any questions, but they just like hover. And I get it, right? We got secret shopped all the time when I work there. I don't know if that's the way it is still, but I got secret shopped constantly working there, where somebody would come in and you had to give them the right pitches. You had to you know, offer the right kind of help. You had to try to upsell every sale. So if I knew somebody came in, right, and they had $6 in trade-in credit, and they're like, I want to buy a pre-owned copy of Halo 3. I still had to be like, hey man, you want to try to get the warranty on this, even though they only had enough to buy the game. Hey man, do you want to while you're in here, why don't you pick up another controller? Like, I had to try to upsell them. So I get from the employee's perspective, but like, so that's your floor experience, right? Last time I went in there, I was like, I'm just browsing, man. We're not looking for anything in particular. He's like, we got a big summer sale going on. Hold on. He runs up to the front of the store, grabs an ad, hands it to me, and I'm like, man, now I feel like an ass. I gotta walk around with this thing in my hand, and I'm just gonna leave it on the counter when I go to check out. Like, it's inconvenient. I don't want to hold your stinking paper ad. I can see the signs everywhere saying that there's a sale. I don't need this. Anyway, but then you get to the counter, right? Hey man, you a Power Up Reward member with us? Yeah, let me give you my number. It's just kidding, not gonna give you guys my number. Let me give you my number. Oh man, your Power Up Reward card expired. Yeah, it's been expired for like 18 months, man. I don't really have any interest in. Oh man, but you can save like $3 on your purchase just today. It basically pays for itself. I'm like, it doesn't really pay for itself. They're like, all right, well, is there anything coming out that you're looking to pre-order, man? Nope, not really. Well, what systems are you on? Let me print off a list. Let me print off a list of games. That's my favorite. And then like, you got this fucking novel length list of every single game they're taking pre-orders on because I own every platform that you can play on. And they're like, hey man, yeah. Let me print this list off for you. And it's like a dot matrix printer. The customer service experience is terrible. It's terrible. When I was interviewed, they were like, do you ever think that there's such a thing as too much customer service? I said, yeah. They were like, do you want to explain that? I said, I think that it doesn't take an idiot to figure out. I didn't say it exactly like this, but I said, it doesn't take an idiot to figure out when you're talking to a customer that they just want to be left alone to look. And I am much more likely to purchase something if somebody's not hovering over me than I am if you're just telling me about everything I touch. We were in there, this was a while ago, but my wife was looking at some stuff, and this dude walks up, and she was like looking at this Breath of the Wild like poster, or I don't remember exactly what it was. It was some sort of Breath of the Wild collectible. And this guy walks up to her and goes, a guy that's working there, he goes, now that's from a game called The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Like, we got motherfucking Danny O'Dwyer here. He knows everything about video games. He's just dropping knowledge left and right. It's just become a meme among me and my friends. We're like, a little game called Breath of the Wild. But like, hey man, you leave me alone, I'm probably gonna spend money here. All right? I'm much more likely to spend money here if you leave me alone. But yeah, if they can take care of that and make it more of like a hangout space. Like, if I want to talk to you, I'll talk to you. And I'm sure that there's people who come in there and they want to talk about like how much they want to see another Splinter Cell game or anything like that. It did come across as sexist. And my wife took a lot of offense to the fact that this guy came up to her and was like, let me explain to you that this little game is Breath of the Wild. So she took a little offense to that. Like, girls don't know games, yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm not even going to get into like the customer experiences that I had working there. And, we had several, lady employees and the shit that they had to go through and endure working there. But it's the same way with the dude employees going up to the girls that are shopping. Girls aren't video games. Fact. Dario dropping the hotness in here. Mother just texted me. Oh man. I need to reply to that here in a few minutes. All right. Moving on, guys. I think this is a good direction. I think this is a good direction for GameStop for them to lean into esports and kind of like this boutique retro gaming experience. I'm excited to see how this expands out if they try to recreate some of like the nostalgia that people have for GameStop, right? You can't download an N64 game, and that's their logic, right? It future-proofs you. Like, hey, if this is the place to come to buy N64 games, guess what? You can't download N64 games to play on your N64. We're likely going to be able to download N64 games at some point, right? To play on like our Switch or something. If you're into buying the physical games, you can't download that. So All right.